If a generalized Mark Grayson we know from Invincible's first 3 seasons on Amazon Prime were to be in the world of One Punch Man, how would he get along with their famous heroes? This will be a casual but fun tier list looking at which heroes he'd be friends with and those he wouldn't. So with Invincible joining the Hero Association for this tier list, let's find out who Mark will create the best connections with inside of this eccentric group of heroes who are notoriously tough to work with. Before anything though, the tiering must be done. At the bottom we have negative. This signals that Mark and this person are definitely not friends. It could be that they don't see eye to eye on something important, or that there's just no joy to be found there. Awkward is the next tier, and this means that while there's no real disliking or negativity, their interactions are somewhat uncomfortable, or as the tiering name suggests, awkward. Acquaintance is in the middle tier. This mostly suggests that they get along, but there's no real warmth there or any reason to hang out when not engaging in hero work. Above this is good terms. This indicates that Mark and this person will generally have favorable interactions. They get along whenever they're in the same place, hold similar values, maybe even sometimes team up and have no problem engaging in small talk. And finally, friends. These are people who Mark can relate with the most, confide his problems to, trust in entirely, and even meet up with outside of hero duty. And I don't mean surface level friends, I mean real and genuine friendship. Without any further ado, let's make Mark some new hero buddies now that he's an S-class hero. And what better way to start than with Pretty Prisoner? This almost seems too easy considering Mark had his whole crash out concerning Cecil working with criminals. However, I don't think this one turns out quite as bad as you think. Despite his crimes and being somewhat dense, Prisoner is a very humble, polite, and even welcoming man who gives everything he has to being a hero. It's a job he takes incredibly seriously while always trying to learn from his shortcomings. Mark may initially kick up a fuss about working alongside a convict, but interacting with Prisoner more than a few times and fighting alongside him will make it clear to Mark that he's as dedicated to being a hero as one could be. And Prisoner's seemingly endless patience and understanding for others' negative opinion of him would eventually mellow Mark out. Also, the fact that Prisoner returns to prison each time he handles hero business should go a long way in helping Mark accept that, justice is being served between hero duty. So, Prisoner goes into the awkward category. Mark would soon come to tolerate Prisoner as a hero who fights as hard as anyone else with intentions as noble as anyone else, all to make up for the crimes he does. But he will most definitely not feel comfortable around Prisoner, which is one thing that'll never change. But hey, maybe he'll get along better with William. However, while Mark may do his best to give Prisoner the cold shoulder, he'll be getting frozen out from Flashy Flash. These two wouldn't have much to talk about, and Flashy Flash wouldn't be interested in finding much conversation from him to begin with. To Flash, Invincible would just seem like a slow, stiff rookie with the skill level of a brick. I doubt Mark would be able to say or show anything to make Flash warrant spending time with him, and should they ever share words, Flash will most likely keep it brief and possibly even dismissive. It'd be an awkward placement for these two. They won't be enemies, rivals, or anything of the like. They'll simply just not have much to say. And I can't imagine Mark pushing himself too far out there to try and create some sort of connection with the distant ninja. Someone who isn't so tough to speak to though is Super Alloy Darkshine. While his obsession with tanning, muscles, and posing can be a little odd, Mark would definitely find it a lot easier to interact with Darkshine compared to other S-class heroes. I could see them lifting weights together and sparring during times when they're both within Hero Association HQ. Given their age difference, I wouldn't expect them to be hanging out much in their personal lives, yet they'd certainly get along, and Darkshine would likely become a comforting pillar for Mark to gravitate toward during hero meetings or events, since, for what it's worth, he knows he can talk to Darkshine like a relatively normal person when compared to some of the more egotistical heroes. I think this could end up in friends or good terms, but going with Darkshine being nearly a decade older and Mark having more early adult life things to deal with, I'll play it safe and put him in the good terms category with potential to one day be strong friends. Tank Top Master is a similar situation. He's a fantastic guy with a strong set of morals and the heart of a true hero. Mark would no doubt get along just fine with Tank Top Master, with the only hang up being how Tank Top Master always seems to bring up tank tops in random moments. Again, these guys could be in the friends tier, however Tank Top Master's attention is usually most aligned with helping fellow tank toppers, leading the tank topper army, and cultivating his strength to inspire future tank toppers. I think I've broken a record for how many times I've mentioned tank tops in one paragraph, so maybe I'll be invited to the tank topper army next. Anyway, Mark and Tank Top Master would be friendly for sure, sure, although he'd likely have to politely refuse an invitation to become a tank topper here and there. Still, I can see Mark assisting the tank toppers occasionally against large powerful threats, so Master would always know that Mark wears a tank top in his heart. It's good terms for Tank Top Master. Nice guy, noble hero, bit weird regarding tank tops though. Wait a minute, what's that? Can you guys hear that? Justice Crash! That's the sound of the GOAT arriving, Moomin Rider. Mark and Moomin Rider being friends feels more canon than anything. I can already tell that Mark would have big respect for Rider's efforts and heart, especially seeing how his level of strength in such a crazy world doesn't stop him from getting out on that bike and helping as many people as possible no matter the situation. I can see Mark making an effort to check up on Rider pretty often, and I think whenever they meet, they start to build a friendship where they confide in one another. Moomin Rider will listen to Mark's problems and give him advice, while Mark would appreciate his honesty and kind nature. They're very similar in their values despite the power difference, and given the types of personalities from the S-Class, Rider would be that reliable normalcy he can relax with. I'm putting Moomin Rider in the friends category. Mark would respect his efforts a lot, and I think their personalities would resonate strongly, and I can picture these guys getting meals together out at some small place, maybe once or twice a week. A My Mask though, not so friendly. What do you think a My Mask would have to say for all of the losses Mark has been taking throughout the 3 seasons of Invincible so far if this were happening in One Punch Man? A My Mask would be on Mark's eyebrows if he was getting dropped by demon level monsters that often, always needing to get bailed out by someone else because he keeps holding back against creatures who are trying to kill him and everyone else in a city-wide radius. Mark is soon going to get sick of a My Mask turning up once in a blue moon when it's only ever to berate his performances while smack talking the rest of the S-Class heroes at the same time. A My Mask is probably not going to rate Invincible whatsoever, and just like he told Genos in season 1, he'll tell Mark that he's been a disappointment so far and that he better stop diminishing how S-Class heroes look in public, or he might have to rethink that Invincible name of his. It's negative for a My Mask, who is probably going to scrutinize Mark even harder because of his hero name selection. You might be called Invincible, but I'm yet to be convinced. And if you think that's bad, it's about to get worse. Tatsumaki is not gonna mince words either. Invincible, she'll say, we must have the wrong hero because I had to save your ass for the 3rd time this week. Tatsumaki is not going to hold back during meetings and encounters if Mark is getting dropped or finding himself in sticky situations because he's getting overwhelmed or holding back. Tatsumaki does not play games, and if she thinks he's not to the standard, she'll let it be known like she does with other S-Class heroes. Mark is very likely not going to have any kind of good relationship with Tatsumaki, nor will she be trying to make a good one with him, so their chances of being friends are essentially 0. Given that Mark can be a little immature and even whiny at times, Tatsumaki is not mature enough herself to work around those developing aspects of his personality, so it's unlikely they'll find any kind of warmth between them, not even to a general level. It's going to be negative for Tatsumaki, which is no surprise to anyone since she's in this tier for a lot of other heroes too. But it's not all bad though. Zombie Man would always be there to help defuse the situation, and Mark would come to see him as one of the more level-headed heroes in the S-Class meetings. With Zombie Man being a mature, reliable, and straight-talking guy, I think Mark would begin to appreciate him a lot after a few conversations. He doesn't lash out, he's pretty chill, he doesn't try to cause problems, and he knows his own strengths. I can imagine Mark coming to Zombie Man whenever he needs advice, or wants his take on something which might be troubling him, to which Zombie Man is the type of guy who would hear him out and give his honest thoughts on the matter. I want to say that they'd be in the friends tier, yet I can't picture them being overly buddy-buddy since Zombie Man tends to keep to himself in general, aside from getting milkshakes with Child Emperor of course, but I don't think he's going out for milkshakes with Mark. I believe Mark would begin to see Zombie Man as something of a partial mentor. Maybe mentor is not the right word, but I think you get what I mean, though I can't picture the two of them hanging outside of work due to Zombie Man's overall nature. Good terms is the tier where I think I'll put it, personally. Another similar case to not exactly being in the right age group is Child Emperor. Mark's around 20 years old, give or take, so a kid his age trying to manage superhero work and a girlfriend isn't going to be getting too buddy-buddy with a 10-year-old. With that being said, I still think they'd get on. Mark will understandably be a little wary at first to see a kid like Child Emperor being on the front lines and engaging in hero work, which might start off their relationship a little rocky if Emperor thinks he's being underestimated. Despite that, it won't be long until Mark realizes the kid knows what he's doing, and the boy genius would likely be able to tell pretty quickly that Mark is a normal enough guy too. You know, aside from being bulletproof and having the ability to fly, of course. If Mark ever needs any kind of help putting something together, Child Emperor would likely be his go-to, and he'd probably say with a little embarrassment each time that he's thankful for how Isamu makes or repairs things for him when needed, since asking for help from a 10-year-old isn't something guys Mark's age would be used to. Even Rudy from Invincible isn't actually as young as he looks when you think about it. Good terms for Child Emperor, since they'd definitely be friendly, and Mark would probably ask how school is going every time he sees him at Hero Association HQ. Someone he won't be having regular conversations with though is Watchdog Man. Watchdog Man is not going to give the slightest damn about Mark, and no matter how bad Mark may try, he's not going to strike up a worthwhile conversation with Watchdog Man, who will just stare at him blankly, answer bluntly, or even just begin to ignore him. Awkward tier for Watchdog Man. What did you expect? Similarly, he won't be getting a lot of conversation out of Drive Knight either. That's another mysterious cat who keeps to himself and won't get all chatty without a real good reason. Mark will be smart enough to gauge that Drive Knight isn't interested in getting to know him, though he may feel uncomfortable if he ever sees that glowing red eye looking in his direction, wondering just how invincible he really is. Awkward tier. Nothing negative, and they'd work together if needed, yet I'd wager they won't get much interaction at all. This could definitely go into negative if Mark ever saw him watching a monster cause havoc to gain strategic data instead of rushing in to help first. Mark wouldn't like that. Metal Knight is certainly a more open case for getting on the wrong side of people. Considering how Metal Knight can just blatantly seem to not give a damn about the consequences of certain situations when he feels he can't intervene efficiently, this would probably start to rub Mark the wrong way. Metal Knight didn't even turn up to help with Boros until after it was done, and even suggested not saving the hostage in the Monster Association arc, and instead suggested blowing the whole thing up with the hostage inside. It's attitudes like this which would likely not make Mark think too highly of Metal Knight's approach to things, especially if he's one of the heroes on the wrong side of it who gets left to pick up the pieces. So even though it's arguable for just how heroic Metal Knight really is, at face value to Mark with how Metal Knight presents himself, it would likely not go down well. So negative tier for Metal Knight. The theme of metal continues because we have Demon Cyborg up next. While you might think these two could bond over how many beatings they take per season, the reality is Genos and Mark won't really have all that much to talk about. They'd likely have a level of respect for one another, especially given how they're both committed heroes who are willing to put it all on the line, except there's just one problem which stops them from becoming close friends. Saitama. Genos isn't here to make friends or go to the movies with Mark and William. All Genos thinks about is becoming stronger, finding the mad cyborg, helping Saitama Sensei, and learning from Saitama Sensei. Every interaction between them will be brief and end with something a little like, "That's good to hear, Invincible. Anyway, I need to go and report back to Saitama Sensei." And there won't even be a goodbye on the end of that. He'll just go. This mother trucker has even walked away from Bang in mid-conversation, so don't expect Genos to be Mark's new best friend. All the while, Mark's going to be looking on quizzically saying his master is a B-class hero, acquaintances category for the Demon Cyborg. And speaking of Saitama, here he is. I know a lot of you would love for me to say he'd be best friends with Saitama, but again, the reality is he wouldn't. Saitama would probably think Mark is a nice enough guy from any interactions they have, and Mark would surmise that Saitama is a slightly dense but harmless enough fellow in return if they ever met. Still, even if he were to find out just how strong Saitama is and wanted to learn more about him, Saitama wouldn't exactly be racing to add him to his list of new attendees. What you have to remember is that Saitama is already up to his neck in attention past what he's happy to handle in his personal life. Genos follows him around everywhere. Fubuki's trying to recruit him to the Blizzard group. Sonic's attacking him every week. Flashy Flash wants to train him, King wants to play video games with him, Bang sometimes pops by, Tatsumaki's radar has his bald head on it, and even a My Mask started to get on his case. He does not have time for Mark II. Just like how he turned down Suryu, Saitama simply doesn't have interest to be another person's focus of attention. Regardless, Saitama would offer him some words of encouragement if they ever fought alongside one another, or if Mark gained his support in a vital moment, and Saitama would probably think he's a good kid with noble intentions from what he can see. But he's not going to think about Mark any more than he does some others, so it's acquaintance tier for Saitama. There's multiple great heroes in One Punch Man, and Saitama doesn't chase them around or think about them either, so I don't think that'd change for Mark. Also, if you think Genos isn't going to be a barrier for Mark getting close to Saitama, think again. Genos is going to be on his case saying, why do you keep approaching Saitama Sensei? Saitama Sensei is a busy man. Stop bothering Saitama Sensei with questions. Meanwhile, Saitama is just going to be standing awkwardly in the background like, you'll want to talk, Genos. When it comes to King, it's going to be different from their own perspectives. Mark is going to think King is the real deal. Why wouldn't he? All the reputation, the accolades, the King engine roaring in those tense moments. Mark may be a little starstruck around King and find it hard to approach him. Meanwhile, King is absolutely not trying to get too close to any S-class hero, since the more he hangs out with those guys, the more he's at risk of being found out. So these guys would likely only get any meaningful interactions around Saitama. Otherwise, even if Mark did want to be friends with King, King is just going to do what he does best and avoid anything which could blow his cover. Acquaintances for King. Pig God and Mark should get along fairly well. Pig God is a great guy and someone who is very genuine and kind, so I'm sure they'd be in the good terms category. Silverfang would be easy for Mark to talk to. The old boy is always respectful and welcoming, so Mark would appreciate that and have respect for an experienced fighter like him who has such great composure and understanding. Of course, they will be friendly, but they're not going to be super tight, so good terms is where I place these two. Atomic Samurai would land in the acquaintance tier. It's similar to Silverfang, with the only difference being Atomic is a little more arrogant and even dismissive, and likely wouldn't see Invincible as anything more than an unskilled brute, even if he does still view him positively as a hero. Overall, nothing really to get Atomic interested, so nothing special here for them. He's too occupied with his disciples and Bang to want to get to know some new kid on the block without any notable martial prowess. And finally, to end on a good note, Metal Bat. You know, Metal Bat's mellowed out a bit since the early days, so as long as you're not acting like a punk, I don't think getting along with Bat is very hard at all, especially given that Mark and him share similar values and a strong sense of justice. The fact that they're kinda close in age too will probably go a long way. These are two young adults doing the best they can and looking out for those who are important to them. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but I can see these two becoming friends. Bat would respect the type of guy Mark is after seeing him push through adversity and give everything he has to protect the vulnerable, and Mark would feel the same for this Bat swinging bruiser with a heart of gold who keeps swinging until evil is defeated for those who can't defend themselves. And if Invincible flies little Zenko around in the air, since I can imagine her asking for a ride through the sky, with Metal Bat's permission of course, well then it's only going to win points with Metal Bat, even if he does stand there all nervous waiting for Mark to bring her back down. This one's either good terms or friends, but I'm going to stick with friends since I think their similar age, resonating values, and good guy tough guy dynamic could be a great little thing. Like the video, subscribe for more content like this if you're a One Punch Man fan, and check out other videos on the channel. If you want to chat about things like this with me in my members only Discord, become a member and join today.